Buckle up for a few questions on inflation.
So here's a question where we're given some information on the nominal and real GDP for 2008 and 2020, and we're asked to calculate the inflation rate. Here we're told to use the GDP deflator to calculate the inflation rate, but any price index would work. Here, because we're given this particular information, GDP deflator is the only one we can really use. Here's the inflation rate formula. Okay, so it's just the percentage change between a price index. And here's the GDP deflator formula. So before we get to actually calculate the inflation rate, we need the GDP deflator for 2020 and for 2008. We just divide the nominal GDP by the real GDP, so we get a sense of what prices were like in a particular year. And if we do that using the numbers for 2020, it's just 30,000 divided by 21,000 times 100, and we get that the GDP deflator in 2020 was 142.86. If you're not told how many decimal places to round to, just round to 2. Do the same thing for 2008. So now we use the information for 2008, nominal GDP divided by real GDP, and we get 105.26. And now we can plug those numbers into the original inflation rate formula, and we get that prices changed by about 35.72%. So the inflation rate from 2008 to 2020 was 35.72%, which essentially means prices increased by about 36% from 2008 to 2020.
You're given some information about an economy and you have to find the growth rate of real GDP and find which stage of the business cycle that is. For questions like this, you always start with the formula. So here we are talking about the growth rate or the percent change. So you just write the formula without any numbers. Then you have to identify which numbers you need. So here we are talking about the real GDP in 2020 compared to 2019. So those are the two numbers you plug into your formula. You punch it in and you find the number. Notice that it's negative, which is fine. Growth rate could be negative. It means that the value is going down. All right. So the stage of, because it's going down for 1 year, that's more than 2 quarters. What it means is that we are talking about a recession. Okay, so it's a slump or a bust.
So we're then asked to calculate the inflation rate from 2019 to 2020. There's a formula for that, which we already saw. It's just the percentage change between the price indexes for those years. We have the price index for 2020 and for 2019, so we just plug those numbers in and we get 3.77%. So prices rose by about 3.77% between 2019 and 2020. Then we're told or asked from 2019 to 2020 to calculate the real interest rate a person in Econville would earn if the nominal interest rate that the bank has given them during that time was 5%. So there's also a formula that relates the real interest rate to the nominal interest rate, but essentially the real interest rate is just the nominal rate adjusted for inflation. So even though the bank is promising you a growth of 5%, we need to account for the fact that everything's getting more expensive. So that's easy. We have the nominal interest rate, it's given in the question. We have, or we calculated the inflation rate during that time, so we just subtract one from the other, and we have that the real rate of growth of any savings would actually be 1.23% and not 5%. So that's what the real interest rate a person would earn from 2019 to 2020 would be.
Now you're told that someone in this economy earned 60,000 in 2019 and 62 in 2020, and you want to find the percent change in real income. Okay, the formula to use here is the percent change of nominal income minus the inflation rate. And the formula for percent change is always the same. It's the second value minus the first value over the first value times 100. This is the growth rate. Okay, so you look at the question, you have 60,000 in the first year and 62,000 in the second year. So you just plug that in and you punch it in, you get 3.3333 forever. And here you can keep 2 decimal places. The question always tells you how many decimal places to keep. The more is better, but usually 2 is a good rule of thumb. Okay, now we know from the last question that the inflation rate was 3.77. So we can plug that in and what we get is negative 0.44%. All right, so you write a sentence interpreting that they lost 0.44% of the real income. So the purchasing power of this person decreased.